Hi, I am Dr. Saqib Mansoor from my channel Learning Anatomy, and today I will discuss with you the basal ganglia or the basal nuclei. And these are the structures shown in the picture, and this is a scheme to show these. I will discuss in detail very soon, and they are concerned with the control of the movement. So our objectives of the today's discussion are enlist the traditional, the main components of basal ganglia, and include the terminology that describes their groupings, describe major connections of the basal nuclei, and list the major neurotransmitters of basal nuclei, trace the indirect and direct pathways through the basal nuclei. That would be my second lecture, the direct and indirect pathways, second lecture, the basal nuclei, and describe Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, and Bellisms. And that would be these diseases of the applied sciences will be the third lecture of the basal ganglia. So basal ganglia, a primary function of the basal ganglia is to provide a feedback mechanism to the cerebral cortex for initiation and control of the motor responses. Most of the output of the basal ganglia that is mediated through thalamus is to reduce or dampen the excitatory input to cerebral cortex. When there is a disruption of this mechanism, motor function disturbances occur. You see this is the cerebral cortex, and the plus sign is the excitatory, and cerebral cortex stimulates basal ganglia, and the minus sign with the red arrow is the inhibitory action on the thalamus. And as the thalamus is stimulating the cerebral cortex, and this is the control of the basal ganglia, which are exerting a negative influence and inhibitory influence on the thalamus to dampen the movements. Generally, it may be said that when the discharge pattern of the basal ganglia becomes excessive, effect on motor systems is to produce abnormal slowing of the movements, right? When this basal ganglia discharge, this inhibitory discharge with red arrow becomes excessive, obviously it will slow down the movements, and that would be quite abnormal, obviously. On the other hand, however, lesions of the basal ganglia produce a reduced output that produces abnormal involuntary movements that occur during periods of rest. This form of disorder is called dyskinesia, right? This is the basal ganglia, and whenever there is a lesion that this is not working, or there's a problem with its normal working of the basal ganglia, so the movement will go unchecked, and there would be no dampening, and the abnormal involuntary movements will ensue. So this is the terminology of the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia or the basal nuclei is applied to a collection of the masses of gray matter that are situated within each cerebral hemisphere, right? These are obviously the gray matter situated in the white matter of the cerebrum. Four main components: the caudate nucleus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, and the amygdala. And a variety of different terminologies is used to describe the basal nuclei. A summary of the terminologies commonly used is shown in the table next slide. And the subthalamic nuclei, the substantia nigra, and red nucleus are functionally closely related to the basal nuclei. So let's move on. These are the, first of all is the picture, then I will discuss this table. So this is the picture, right? You see the picture, right? And this is the caudate nucleus, one component of the this basal nuclei. The basal nuclei, or the basal ganglia. Caudate nucleus with its body, head, and a tail, right? And this is the lentiform nucleus consisting of the two parts, globus pallidus and putamen, right? And this is the amygdala. This is I discussed with you. And this is the overall classification. This is the basal ganglia consisting of the corpus striatum and the amygdala. Corpus striatum, what is that composed of, right? This is paleostriatum and the neostriatum, or simply striatum, right? So paleostriatum divides into globus pallidus, right? And neostriatum then divides into putamen and the caudate nucleus. This is the striatum, the putamen, and the caudate nucleus. And this putamen and the globus pallidus collectively are called as the lentiform nucleus. And further, there are two parts of the globus pallidus, which I will discuss in the coming part of the lecture. So groupings of the basal nuclei, this is what I showed you and talked and discussed with you in the flow chart. This is the striatum, this is the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Lentiform nucleus, putamen and the globus pallidus, and the corpus striatum consists of the lentiform nucleus and the caudate nucleus. So interconnection of the basal nuclei are complex, but here I will discuss only the more important pathways. So what are the components of the basal nuclei? So components are corpus striatum, right? It lie lateral to the thalamus and is almost completely divided by a band of nerve fibers, the internal capsule into the caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus. So the corpus striatum is divided into caudate and the lentiform nucleus. This one is the lentiform nucleus. You see now, we'll use the red laser with you, right? This is the laser. You follow the laser pen. This is the lentiform nucleus, putamen and the globus pallidus, and the internal capsule divides it from the into the caudate nucleus. This is the caudate nucleus, right? So the caudate nucleus and this lentiform nucleus comprise the corpus striatum. The term striatum is applied here because of striated appearance produced by the strands of the gray matter that pass through the internal capsule and connect the caudate nucleus to the putamen of the lentiform nucleus. You could see this again, it's a very beautiful picture. This is the lentiform nucleus, and the outer or the lateral part is the putamen. This is the globus pallidus internally, the medial part. This is the internal capsule, and this is the caudate nucleus. This is the head, and this is the tail of the caudate nucleus. So a few words about the caudate nucleus, right? To follow this laser, this is the caudate nucleus here, right? And this part is the head of the caudate nucleus, and here is the tail of the caudate nucleus. Follow the laser. Caudate nucleus is a large mass of gray matter which is closely related to the lateral ventricle and lies lateral to the thalamus. You see, these gaps are for the lateral ventricle, right? This is the lateral ventricle and lies lateral to the thalamus, right? I enlarge and zoom in the picture. Yes, you could see. So this is, this is a caudate nucleus. This is, lentiform nucleus, and the caudate nucleus with its, head, body, and the tail. And this is the thalamus, right? This is the thalamus. Lateral surface of the nucleus is related to the internal capsule, right? I told you already that the lateral surface of the caudate nucleus is related to the internal capsule, which separates it from the lentiform nucleus, right? It is divided into a head, a body, and a tail. And now I again zoom into the lecture, into this second figure, right? You see this is a caudate nucleus, and sorry, it's a delay. Yes, this is the caudate nucleus, its head, and this here below it is the tail of the caudate nucleus, right? And this is the internal capsule, this one, internal, the labeling is over here, internal capsule. Here, this separates it from the lentiform nucleus, its putamen part. So going on, and the head of the caudate's nucleus is large, rounded, and forms the lateral wall of the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. right? So this is the head over here, right? So this is, is the interior horn of the lateral ventricle. Let me zoom in. This is the interior horn of the lateral ventricle, and this is the head of the caudate nucleus. Inferiorly, head is continuous with the putamen of the lentiform nucleus. This is the putamen, right? Let me catch the laser again. This is a, putamen, and this is the internal capsule, and this is the head of the caudate nucleus. It is continuous with this putamen of the lentiform nucleus. This is the head of the caudate nucleus. So the caudate nucleus and the putamen are referred to as the neostriatum or the striatum. Immediately superior to this point of union, gray matter strands pass through the internal capsule that impart the region a striated appearance. So the term corpus striatum. I showed you already. Again, this is the head of the caudate nucleus. This is the internal capsule. This is internal capsule. It's separating it from the putamen. This is putamen. Outermost is putamen. Inside is the globus pallidus. Body of the caudate nucleus is long and narrow. This is the body. You see here. This is the body of the caudate nucleus. Let me zoom in. Here you see. This was head, and this is the long body. Long and narrow, being continuous with the head in the region of the interventricular foramen. Here, follow the laser. Body of the caudate nucleus constitutes part of the floor of the body of the lateral ventricle. Now, a few words about the tail of the caudate nucleus. Here you see this is the laser, and this is the moving on the tail of the caudate nucleus is long and thin, being continuous with the body in the region of the posterior end of the thalamus. It follows the contour of the lateral ventricle and continues forward in the roof of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. You see, this is the lateral ventricle here, and it follows its course. It terminates anteriorly in the amygdaloid nucleus. Let me zoom in again. Here you see. Yes. This is the tail of the caudate nucleus. This is continuously with the amygdaloid nucleus. Now, lentiform nucleus, very important, lentiform nucleus, and it's a wedge-shaped mass of gray matter having a broad convex base that is directed laterally and whose blade is directed medially. So let me show this first. Here you go. Yes, this is a wedge-shaped mass of the gray matter, and laterally is the putamen, and internally or medially is the globus pallidus. I will tell you later that it consists of the two parts as well: globus pallidus internus and externus. It's a pale staining gray matter. It's placed deep in the white matter of the cerebral hemisphere, being related medially to the internal capsule, right? This is the internal capsule. It's medially, this lentiform nucleus is related to the internal capsule, this. And later separates it from the caudate nucleus and the thalamus. Let's again zoom in, right? This is, this is the head of the caudate nucleus, and it separates it from this deep in the that later separates from the caudate nucleus and the thalamus. Yes, this is the lentiform nucleus, and this is the caudate nucleus, right? It separates it from it. Laterally, lentiform nucleus is related to a thin sheet of white matter called external capsule, which separates it from a slender sheet of gray matter termed the claustrum. So let's see all these structures. You see here, this is the claustrum, gray matter, claustrum. And going on, this is the external capsule. First of all, you see, this is the lentiform nucleus, and lateral to that is the external capsule, which is a white matter, slender sheet. And this is the lateral to the external capsule is the claustrum, which is gray matter slender sheet, right? And lateral to that is the insular cortex, insula or the insular cortex, gray matter. I told you, on the other hand, claustrum separates external capsule from the subcortical white matter of the insula. A vertical plate of white matter serves to divide the nucleus into a lateral, larger, darker portion, putamen, and an inner, lighter portion, globus pallidus. Right? Again, I tell you, this is the, your lentiform nucleus. This is the lentiform nucleus. And this is the outer portion, putamen, and the inner portion, globus pallidus. Globus pallidus is pale. So paleness of the globus pallidus is due to a high concentration of myelinated nerve fibers. So lentiform nucleus continues inferiorly at its anterior end. The putamen is continuous with the head of the caudate nucleus, right? This is, this is the, lentiform nucleus in this picture. It is here, and then inferiorly at its anterior end, it is continuous with the head of the caudate nucleus. Here, this is the head of the caudate nucleus. Globus pallidus, primary output nuclei of the basal nuclei. This is the primary output nucleus, the globus pallidus. I will soon tell you in the connections. And the medial part, it is divided into the medial or the internal segment, the globus pallidus internum, and the lateral or the external segment, the globus pallidus externum. Medial is adjacent to the internal capsule, and the lateral is adjacent to the putamen. I think this picture is better, right? It is divided into two portions. This putamen, sorry, globus pallidus. Amygdaloid nucleus. It is located in the temporal lobe near the uncus. I told you already in the zoom in position. This again, you see it is. This is the amygdaloid nucleus, right? It is regarded as to be part of the limbic system, right? So the limbic system is also related with this basal nuclei or the basal ganglia. Via its connections, it can exert an influence on body's response to the environmental changes. And a very important emotion or the feeling, the fear, the sense of fear. For instance, it can alter the heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and skin color. So very important, this amygdala. So substantia nigra present in the midbrain. You can recall my lecture on midbrain, and last year I gave you the midbrain lecture. And substantia nigra, you can again see this. This is the midbrain cross section, and this part is the substantia nigra. So largest collection of gray matter in the midbrain. And subthalamic nuclei located in the diencephalon are functionally closely related to the action of the basal nuclei. So it consists of two parts, this substantia nigra. Pars compacta contains dopaminergic neurons that contain the pigment melanin. Here, this is a pars compacta, the medial, the inner portion, the substantia nigra. Pars compacta contains the dopaminergic neurons and the pigment melanin. And pars reticularis, this is the outer portion, right? Lateral, substantia nigra outer portions, pars reticulata or reticularis. This is the, it contains gamma aminobutyric acid GABAergic neurons, functions as yet another basal nuclei output. So important that its leads to the, Parkinsonism. Subthalamic nuclei lie between the internal capsule and thalamus, and between the internal capsule and lenticular fasciculus. Neurons of the subthalamic nuclei are glutaminergic, hence excitatory, and have numerous connections to the substantia nigra and globus pallidus. So next is claustrum, right? Few words about the claustrum. I showed you already the picture. You see, first of all, again, this picture. This is, this is claustrum, thin sheet with gray matter. This. It's a slender sheet of gray matter which is separated from the lateral aspect of the lentiform nucleus by the external capsule. I showed you already. This is the external capsule. Lying lateral to the claustrum is the subcortical white matter of the insula. This is insula. Function of the claustrum is not known. Here you see again, this is the claustrum, right? And here, this is the external capsule, white matter. So fewer birds know about the connection of the corpus striatum and the globus pallidus. This is, you see, schema of these connections. This is a motor cerebral cortex. This is a sensory cerebral cortex, thalamus, and the brainstem, which is substantia nigra, and that nucleus. And this is the caudate nucleus and the putamen. This is the globus pallidus. These are the cranial motor nuclei, anterior horn cell of the spinal cord, and the final common pathway to muscles. Here you could see here, this is the, you can say like this is sensory portion cortex, and these portions, thalamus, brainstem, substantia nigra, nucleus, and they are exerting influence on the motor cerebral cortex, which reciprocally exerts its influence on the sensory areas, right? Here you go this. And you see, this is very important one, which a very important point, which I am going to mention now, that from this cerebrum, this direct influences on this cranial motor nuclei and the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord, final common pathway. And this these parts of the basal nuclei have no direct influence or connection with the spinal cord, right? So major input to the basal nuclei is to the caudate nucleus and the putamen, right? From its motor and the sensory cortex, right? Major input to the subbasal ganglia is to the caudate nucleus and the putamen. And the major output is from this globus pallidus, right? Yes, it is the output exerting its influence on the this motor cortex and also the sensory cortex, and these areas, the thalamus, brainstem, substantia nigra, and the nucleus. And I already told you that these basal ganglia, they dampen the influence of the cerebral cortex, the motor activity, by exerting the influence on the thalamus mainly. So caudate nucleus and putamen comprise main sites for receiving input to the basal nucleus. I told you already, this is the caudate nucleus and the putamen, main insight, main input. Globus pallidus comprises major site from which the output leaves. This is the globus pallidus, and the output is leaving, divided into globus pallidus internus and the globus pallidus externus, two parts. They receive no direct input from or output to the spinal cord. I told you already, right? So then I will emphasize on the connections of the corpus striatum first. The afferent fibers to the corpus striatum are corticostriate fibers, thalamostriate fibers, nigrostriate fibers, brainstem striatal fibers, and the efferent fibers are the corpus striatum are striatopallidal fibers and the striatonigral fibers. So afferent fibers, the corticostriate fibers, right? So these are, let me enlarge it for you. Here you go. Yes, this is a corticostriate fibers. This is the cerebral cortex and the corticostriate fibers, right? And this is the lentiform nucleus, and the outer is the putamen, and this is the globus pallidus, right? This is putamen, and this is the globus pallidus, and these are the corticostriate fibers coming to the putamen. Corticostriate fiber from all parts of the cerebral cortex acts on the send to the caudate nucleus and putamen. This is to the putamen, and also the various parts of the cerebral cortex send to the axons to the caudate nucleus. This is caudate nucleus projection, and this is to the putamen of the basal nuclei. Each part of the cerebral cortex is projected to a specific part of the caudate putamen complex. Most projections are from the cortex of same side, right? Largest input is from sensory motor cortex. Told you already in the previous flow chart. Afferent fibers. Continue. Thalamostriate fibers. What about thalamostriate fibers? And let me enlarge. These are the thalamostriate. This is thalamus, and these are the thalamostriate fibers going to the, here, putamen. Thalamostriate fiber. And these thalamostriate fiber also going to the caudate nucleus. So large number of axons are sent from intralaminar nuclei of the thalamus to the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Nigrostriatal fibers, very important. Axons are sent from neurons in the substantia nigra to the caudate and the putamen. Here you see again, I enlarge. Here you see this is the striatonigral. This is the substantia nigra of the midbrain, and this is the fiber going to the putamen, and from here fibers going to the caudate nucleus. Nigrostriatal. Brainstem striatal, ascending fibers from brainstem terminate in the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Told you that afferent, all the afferents go to the caudate nucleus and the putamen. This is the input. So the efferent fibers, right, these are the few one. Striatopallidal. These fibers pass from caudate nucleus and putamen to globus pallidus. Let me zoom in. This is a striatopallidal. This is, first of all, you see this striatopallidal, right? These are the fibers going to this globus pallidus. These are the striatopallidal. And striatonigral fibers, these fibers pass from caudate nucleus and the putamen to the substantia nigra. Striatonigral. Let me show you. Striatonigral. These are, this is the striatonigral fiber, and this is the striatonigral fibers, right? So connection of the globus pallidus now. Now the focusing on the globus pallidus. Its afferent fibers are striatopallidal. I've shown you already. Efferent fibers are pallidofugal fibers divided into 4 groups. First is the ansal lenticularis, which pass to the thalamic nuclei. B is the fasciculus lenticularis, which pass to the subthalamus. And C is the pallidotegmental fibers, which terminate in the caudal tegmentum of the midbrain. And number 4, the pallidosubthalamic fibers, which pass to the subthalamic nuclei. So afferent fibers, first of all, this is a striatopallidal fiber, pass from caudate nucleus and the putamen to the globus pallidus. This is striatopallidal. I've shown you already. This is striatopallidal, pass from the caudate nucleus and putamen to the globus pallidus. Striatopallidal. I've shown you already. You could see this is the striatopallidal from putamen to the globus pallidus, and also from this caudate nucleus. This and then the pallidofugal fibers. These fibers are complex and grouped into these 4 I've told you already. Major neurotransmitter. In the last topic of today's lecture on the basal ganglia is the major neurotransmitters of basal nuclei pathways. So first of all is the glutamate containing neurons project from cerebral cortex to striatum. They project from subthalamic nucleus to the globus pallidus, excite the striatal, GABAergic, and the subcholinergic neurons. GABA-containing neurons are predominant neurons of the striatal system. They are found in the striatum, globus pallidus, and the substantia nigra, pars reticularis. Give origin to the following GABAergic projections: striatopallidal, pallidothalamic, striatonigral, and nigrothalamic projections. These degenerate in Huntington's disease. So then there is a dopamine containing neurons present in the substantia nigra, pars compacta, give rise to the dopaminergic nigrostriatal projections and degenerate in Parkinson's disease. I told you that substantia nigra has 2 parts, pars compacta and pars reticulata. Then the next neurotransmitters, the neurons containing acetylcholine, It's a local circuit neurons are found in the striatum. Neuropeptide containing neurons included in these are enkephalin, dynorphin, somatostatin, substance P, neurotensin, cholecystokinin, and neuropeptide Y, also found in basal nuclei. These coexist with major neurotransmitters. The major one are, for example, GABA, substance P, and GABA and enkephalin. So again, the functions of the basal nuclei. Let's discuss. Basal nuclei are joined with each other and are connected with the numerous regions of the nervous system by the help of a very complex number of neurons. This is a diagram and the flowchart I discussed with you already. This is your basal ganglia, caudate nucleus and the putamen, which receive the input, and this is the globus pallidus giving the main output. So basically, corpus striatum receives afferent information from most of the cerebral cortex, thalamus, subthalamus, and the brainstem, including substantia nigra and that nucleus. This is the input coming from this motor cortex of the cerebrum, and this is the sensory cerebral cortex, thalamus, brainstem, substantia nigra, and the red nucleus. So within the corpus striatum, information is integrated and the outflow passes back to the same areas listed above. This circular pathway is believed to function as follows. Basal nuclei activity is initiated by information received from premotor and supplemental areas of the motor cortex, primary sensory cortex, thalamus, and brainstem. And the outflow from basal nuclei is channeled through a globus pallidus, which then exerts influence on the activities of the motor areas of the cerebral cortex or other motor centers in the brain. In this way, basal nuclei control the muscular movements by exerting influence on cerebral cortex and have no direct control through the descending pathways to brainstem and spinal cord. Thus, basal nuclei help in regulation of the voluntary movements and the learning of the motor skills. The basal nuclei exert influence on skilled cortical motor activities, and examples are to write letters of the alphabet, to drawing a diagram, to pass a football, to use eye muscles while looking at an object, and to use vocal cords in talking and singing. The individual cannot perform the discrete movements of the feet and hands on the opposite side of the body in case of destruction of the primary motor cerebral cortex. Still, the individual can perform gross, crude movements of the opposite limbs. If the corpus striatum is destroyed after that, paralysis of remaining movements of opposite side of the body takes place. In addition to influence the execution of specific movement, for example, the limbs, basal nuclei also help prepare for the movements, right? It's very important. They help prepare for the movements. This is obtained by controlling axial and girdle movements of the body and the positioning of the proximal parts of the limbs. In certain neurons of the globus pallidus, the activity gets increased before active movements occur in distal limb muscles. The main preparatory function enables trunk and limbs to be placed in the appropriate positions before primary motor part of the cerebral cortex activates the discrete movements in feet and hands. So these are the key concepts discussed with you. The corpus striatum, gray matter that lies lateral to the thalamus, divided by internal capsule into caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus. I think no need to go over it again. Already told you enough. Prepare for the movement, the main function, that in placing the trunk in appropriate position in preparation for movement of the lower extremities. I thank you very much. This lecture was a bit long, and please, if you like my lecture, please subscribe it, like it, and share, and stay safe. Bye.